Welcome to Rollwise, the weekly podcast that explores all things tabletop RPGs. I'm Mike, one of your hosts, and I'm joined by my fellow RPG lovers, Brent
Hello, everybody.
and Jeff.
Hey, everyone.
We want to first of all say thank you to all of our listeners. We appreciate you stopping by. If you're on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and click that little bell so you can know when we release new episodes. And we do try to release episodes weekly. And so thanks for listening. In today's episode, we're going to kind of keep focused. The last few episodes have had more than one topic. We've kind of branched out, usually talking about a few different things. But this week, we're going to kind of stick on AI. Seems to be the popular topic. And I know we've touched on it a little bit, especially before, in terms of Dungeons and Dragons and what they could possibly bring to the table with AI DMs. But we thought we'd dive into the subject a little bit more, give some impressions, and maybe some of the pros that we see and some of the cons. So I guess we could first start off with what is AI? Now, I mean, at this point in life, everybody should at least have an idea of what AI is.
Skynet.
Skynet. Okay, so on one end of the spectrum, we have Skynet. And Jeff, did you have any place you wanted to put your perception of what AI is?
No, I think it's pretty much Skynet. I think honestly, it's the personal digital assistants that we all use to some degree, or have access to, right? Siri, Google, Alexa, whatever the Microsoft monstrosity is called. I think I forget that one.
Cortana, wasn't that?
Yeah, that's it. It's a horrible
Cortana.
name. Not memorable, or not memorable to me.
Okay. Yeah. And so I think that those definitely are very evocative definitions, because I think the instant somebody says Skynet, you pretty much think end of the world, like robots are coming, which, I mean, I think if you look at all the possible futures, that's on one of those pathways, like we go, whoops, I guess we went too far. But I mean, just in case anybody has no idea what we're talking about, or you tend to be a very low tech, what did that one guy call him? Analog gamer. If you tend to be an analog gamer that's never used technology in your game before. Artificial intelligence, that's the definition. That's what AI stands for. And it's the simulation of human intelligence, right? If people see AI in the most, I guess the most crazy places these days. Before, AI was really good at automating very simple tasks and everything like that. But nowadays, it seems like the game is being upped quite considerable, and new AI engines and everything like that are learning how to increase their perception. They're actually reasoning through things. They're able to learn, either guided through a training, they use training where like a person will train the models that the AI uses, or it will be self-trained. Usually those go very, very wonky and random. And of course, it uses natural language processing to kind of understand how we talk to it. And so I think that when we look at AI, everyone has, I think, very different understandings of what it can and can't do. Just out of curiosity, did you guys use AI in your jobs, or have you used AI in like your businesses that you're aware of?
My business is not.
No.
I would be aware of it if they did.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've worked for some large companies, and they had different AI projects. I didn't work directly with any of them, but really, any corporation that's not trying to automate some things is probably going to be left behind in the next few years, because they'll have other competitors that can come in and severely undercut them on price, taking some really labor-intensive, repetitive tasks. And I mean, at a basic extreme, if you look at a automated answering system for your phone line, an IVR, for people who know what that means, can be slightly AI-like. It's really basic, right? Just like the robots that manufacture cars, right? Replacing some of those repetitive and or dangerous jobs that humans used to do. But yeah, so I did work for companies that did use AI.
Yeah. So I think we're going to try to keep this overly simplistic, because I don't think any of us are AI experts. There are definitely technologists and everything like that that can give you both the doomsday-esque scenarios as well as the promising futures that AI can bring. But I had the fortunate, I guess I had fortune that I was able to work more directly with an AI company that was producing, kind of those virtual assistant. And there's definitely like robotic process automation, which you're talking about, where you take a simple task, you basically have it run it. So if you send in an email, it's going to go through an automated process. It's going to check some things and it's going to go, oh, I see a keyword. So I'm automatically going to do these sequence of steps to the email. And from a person on a customer side, they're going to get they're going to get an automated response, or even sometimes a solution, depending on how complicated the task is or something like that. But then on the other side of it, you're going to have things like actual virtual assistants, which have very complicated language models that they follow, dialogue trees that have been built, conversations that they've been trained on to be able to handle and everything along those lines. And I think that's where we start to get into that sci-fi-esque level of artificial intelligence. I think that, everyone has kind of looked at sci-fi and being like, oh, wouldn't that be cool if we had like a AI kind of like the, like in Star Trek, where you're just like, hey, can you do this for me or tell me this or archive this or do these notes? It just makes it so much easier for you to do all that stuff. And the reason it's been so hot lately is because Chat GTP and a few other AI products. What's that?
GPT.
Chat GPT.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't say that clearly enough. But yeah, Chat GPT. They're on version 4, I believe, right now. And then Midjourney, the AI artistry thing. There's actually a couple voice ones that exist now. And so, basically you give it audio samples and it's able to replicate anyone's voice to a higher degree than I'm comfortable with. And so it's pretty cool. So, I mean, we are kind of on that cusp. Do we go Skynet or do we go something much more, I guess, utopian in nature? That's, I guess, to be determined. So out of the products and stuff like that, have you guys used ChatGPT or Midjourney or anything like that?
Well, I've used Midjourney just as it's more of a thought experiment for me than anything else.
Yeah. What has been your experience over the last few months? Because I think you actually subscribed to the Midjourney thing, didn't you?
I do. I subscribe to Midjourney, and it's one of those things where I know everybody's really worried about it, and Midjourney is like a terrible, terrible bad word, and you shouldn't talk about it. But I use it more as art prompts to inspire me to do real artwork. Or if I need a shortcut to something like a symbol or something easy like that. But it's kind of nice to one of the things I told a friend of mine that I like to do with Midjourney is if I wake up at night in the middle of the night and I have this thought in my head, I plug it into Midjourney and see what Midjourney spits out. That's where the God Bunny came from, is Brent woke up at 3 a.m. and was like, what does God Bunny look like in Midjourney? And then that's where the picture came from. And so that sort of thing where you can instantly do a thing is pretty neat. It's come a long way. Originally when you would do things with Midjourney, there would be a lot of kind of weird things. It didn't know how to interpret human anatomy very well. Didn't really understand how to do animals very well. You would get things with horses where it was underlying muscle structure and 14 legs. Just abominant things from Nightmare. But it seems to the bunnies that I got look like actual rabbits, so it's come quite a ways. So
yeah, and I think that's kind of so when we get into this, you kind of touch on one part that's really quite difficult to really know what is the right answer and everything like that. Because when you think about what does AI challenging and everything like that, is that when you think about originality and creativity and everything along those lines, is that it's able to generate content, and you're saying God Bunny and all that stuff, and you said it's already a bad word because it's what images or representations did it use to create the God Bunny, right?
Well, right.
And so go ahead.
And the other concern, and I know this has come up a lot from different, and I've actually seen this a lot in the role-playing space, is there's been a lot of conversations about small publishers using entirely AI generated artwork for role-playing books. And I know that is not something that people have been super happy with because it's cheap. It's cheaper than buying labor. And while I wouldn't say that that's probably a good idea personally, I can kind of see the draw.
Yeah. And so it's because it is interesting to think about, because I think if you go back, when was the first time I heard about Midjourney? Because I think I heard about Midjourney before I heard about Chat GTP. I think that's how the order of operations worked for me. But when I heard about Midjourney at first, I think the thing that really was the spark that really got under everybody's whatever. I'm trying to see if there's a way to say this not so explicitly, so I can remove that explicit tag. But basically, the thing that really got people upset was there was that art competition where that guy had submitted in the digital art category a picture that was absolutely beautiful. And then when interviewed after getting his first place blue ribbon, I think they still get out blue ribbons for that shit. He was just like, I used Midjourney AI. And then all of a sudden, like everyone went from like, oh my God, you have such beautiful art to you're fucking trash. Everything is trash. AI is trash. We hate you so much. And I was like, whoa. this
Well, yeah, it comes down to like you're cheating, right? Like
Mhm.
that's the thing, is like you're cheating. Like you didn't actually do this work. And for the most part, I can't say that's a wrong interpretation, because like it is just, you put in a word and it spits out a picture based
Mhm.
on other people's work, because it basically researches um other people's work to
Mhm.
make that happen. The one thing you can do is there are certain things you can use in conjunction with Midjourney, where you
Mhm.
can like make a lot of edits and changes to the Midjourney pictures, which is more along the artistic side. Like I use Midjourney and to
Mhm.
like fix things, but as Midjourney learns, like that's going to be less necessary too.
Mhm. Yeah, because they're up to version 5, and version 5, like I saw a version 3 picture of a prompt, a version 4 picture of the prompt, and a version 5 picture of a prompt in a recent article. And it was pretty amazing to see like just how much it had progressed between the different generations there. To basically looking at Midjourney version 5, I was like, wow, it's got proper appendages. It's really detailed, far more detailed than most artists would be willing to go into, and everything like that. And it interpreted the prompt in a much more accurate way than I expected. So I mean, and speaking of which, I don't know if you guys know this, but there is a new job emerging in the technical field, an engineering job. It is a prompt engineer. You guys know that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Can you imagine making $150,000 just to fucking figure out what to prompt into Chat GTP? Like, I mean, I don't know what kind of experience you need for that, but might be applying for some jobs. Who knows? I feel
No,
like I'm an
well,
AI
there's
whisperer.
there's a certain amount of programming involved. There are websites that people can Google and look up. There's a Discord server.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's people trying to start codifying some of that stuff to make it easier, because you can run afoul of different rules and stuff. But when you know do different things, I've only glanced at the prompt engineering Discord, but there's a lot of good information there, and so
Mhm.
there may be jobs. I mean, there's currently some jobs, but I don't know. The further we get along, I don't know how much AI will you have an AI that actually does nothing but write prompts.
Yeah, it makes prompts for a different
AI,
system.
the the,
Yeah,
System.
the AI that helps you it helps you prompt another AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny circle, like because the interesting part about it to me is that when you think about AIs and what they're doing for each other, is like, I think one video I saw out there is that basically somebody was saying, well, with the current version of Chat GPT and Midjourney, you can have it translate through Chat GPT what your prompt should be into Midjourney, and then that should give you the closest representation. Now, I'm not going to lie. I tried it just to experiment to see how that process works. And I don't think it's there yet, but I don't know if I was using version 5 or version 4 of Midjourney, honestly. So, before anybody jumps on us and basically says we're a bunch of horrible people for at least looking at these tools, I'm an early adopter of many types of technology. I may not be a technological person, like I don't know how to program things. I'm not an engineer or anything like that, but I'm curious. I think that there are definitely some stuff that you can ethically, look at and basically be like, okay, well, AI is bad because Skynet, and you could be making weapons with this AI in 2 years. Well, sure, I agree that's an outcome, but you could also, as we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, create a virtual DM. They can help you entertain yourself, make you feel less lonely on the weekends. So there's definitely a spectrum of good and bad that happens here. But I guess where do you guys fall on this? If you were to say to people that could be listening to this, is AI bad? Is AI good? Is it somewhere in between? Do you guys have strong feelings on that right now?
I think it's like any technology. I I think if it makes people more productive and it saves time and it's not abused or used to steal other people's intellectual property, then yeah, I'm all for it. But I do
Mhm.
think there has to be some guidance. I mean, but yeah, I would say in general I'm for it. I mean, we've had so much automation in the last 100 years of different types of things. This is just another step in that direction.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not the most techie guy, so I don't really I'm an end user through and through. So I don't have very many opinions on it, but I think like anything, like it's a tool and what people decide to use with it is what makes it good or bad, not necessarily the tool itself.
Mhm.
And we could get into, I mean, we don't need to get into a human being's propensity to use any tool for the wrong reason, but it is something to keep in mind. But like um I don't know.
Well, so it's funny you should mention the wrong reasons because some of the things that it's already being used for, and in case anybody's listening and they want to know some of this stuff, but right now there's a person that's actually using it to SWAT people he provides a service where you pay him $75 and he'll SWAT a person's home for you using this AI technology. So that's a bad thing.
It
Um,
is.
Certain scammers are doing really good jobs with the technology, with the vocal stuff to create family emergency scams. You guys know what those are? Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-hmm. Where you
So
get a
for
phone call.
Yeah, you basically get a phone call, and the summary of the scam is that the person on the end of the line pretends to be a child or relative that is in prison and needs bail money or something like that. And for some reason, the local jail is only accepting Google gift cards. It's a very
Oh yeah,
weird scam, but
no, people have been doing that even before AI.
mhm,
That it's especially to older people.
yeah.
Just like this distant relative, this
Mhm.
nephew, great nephew that you forgot.
Or I'm your grandson. I'm in jail. I'm so scared. I killed somebody. I need to post bail. Can you give me $5,000 and via Cash App, and so I can I can pay off these guys or something like that. I mean, and it's interesting. I think because the level of sophistication goes up, they get Chat GPT to write the script as needed, and then they get this vocal synthesizer to say it in your voice. I mean, imagine how crazy that would be if you because Jeff, you got some kids. What if one of your kids called you and was like, and it sounded just like him, but maybe a little bit weird?
Okay,
And
so I have kids,
Mhm.
and they don't use the phone unless they're talking to their grandparents.
There you go. It's not a
My
text.
my
Shit, it's
young
not my
my
kids.
exactly, my youngest son just assumes that any phone call is for nefarious purposes and will not answer.
So what you're saying is you don't even have a safe word. You just basically know that if you got a call from one of your kids, you're like, if you're not, what is this? Who are
Yeah,
you?
if
Who are
it's
you
if it's not
scamming?
coming from their direct number, no. I just maybe the AI could get good enough that if you were actually talking to them, you may not know, but I think we're a long ways away from that.
Yeah.
I still see stuff written. I still see stuff that people put in prompts from Chat GPT and get a response, and it
Hmm.
absolutely nonsensical,
Yeah.
like 100% just sentence structure butchered. You
Hmm.
know, descriptors in sentence A for something in sentence B. Yeah,
Well, that's true. I mean, it
it's
is
getting better,
still
but
getting better,
it's
but it's not
I'm just
it's not
it
saying,
does
if
a
good.
lot of things poorly.
yeah, if Joe Rogan calls you and says he has an emergency and he needs a phone number or he needs a $5,000, probably don't send it to them. That's all I'm
But
saying.
if he needs your social security number, it's a completely legitimate thing.
Give him one of your friends. That's my answer.
So So I guess in terms of just like bringing it back to role playing games and stuff like that, um, this since last week's episode, I basically got on ChatGPT and I wanted to try the DM prompts to see how it felt like it was rolling in terms of how it basically conducted itself as a dungeon master. I mean, I feel like that we've talked about this before is that there's a scarcity of dungeon masters for most systems because it's like one of those things where there's a lot of players and not a lot of DMs or game masters or keepers or whatever system that you're playing. And I think that's always kind of been the case. It's always been more fun to be the player. It takes it's a more rare type where you have groups like ours where everyone, there's a lot of people that don't mind DMing that'll play and stuff like that. But
I don't think it's more fun. It's just less stress. Like
true.
Being a GM requires a lot more.
It does.
Like time, and being a player requires almost none, especially if you're one of us and just show up to game night. Notes, Pff, no. But I feel like that's honestly, I feel like that's most parties. Like notes, no, we didn't take any. It would take somebody like with a lot of dedication to the game. But but like I would say that you're correct. There is more players than GMs just because GMing is more difficult.
Well, my GM hot take is that not only is there fewer GMs than players, there's way fewer good GMs. And okay, this is not a shot at anybody. If you got the heart and you want to run a game, run a game.
That hurts, Jeff. That hurts.
Do it. No, people need to do it. But if you've ever played with somebody who's really good or played with somebody who's exceptionally marginal, there's a difference in the game experience. But doesn't mean you can't have. I mean, we have fun. You guys,
yeah.
Well, I've never actually GM'd for you guys. I've only GM'd a handful of times in my entire life, and I feel sorry for every one of those people who sat through those games. But I think most of them had fun.
Well,
I think most of them had fun.
I'm trying to think of a poor GM. The only poor GM I can think of was at a convention once, and they ran. He used the Cyberpunk 2020 rules, but they ran the plot from Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, which for me was okay.
That sounds fun on the surface.
Which for me was okay because I hadn't seen the movie, but everybody else had. So like everybody kind of knew what was happening, and I had no idea.
They figured it out.
Yeah, and it was interesting, but like it was just and it was a fun game. But I don't think I've ever had. I don't know if I've ever had a really bad GM. A person I would say is a bad GM. I guess being the always GM for a long time means that I have a lot of empathy towards anybody who's willing to do it.
Yeah, I am not trying to run down anybody who's GM'd. There are some exceptionally skilled individuals out there that it's different, but more people should try GMing. More, really, honest to God, more people should.
Yeah, and I think other than the anxiety-inducing things that you put on yourself regarding GMing isn't so bad. It's just, and if anybody's on the fence, I agree. You should definitely give it a try, because the one thing I can tell you right now is you definitely won't make the same mistakes that ChatGPT did while it was GMing me through its fictional scenarios. So, in terms of
like forgetting you are a GM and can just make it up, like just forgetting and wandering off.
So this is what I really thought was kind of amusing about it, is because I don't consider myself a bad storyteller. I would not put myself in the same league as some of those professional, kind of celebrity status YouTube, Twitch GMs that they have like name recognition and all that kind of stuff because they do such a good job.
You mean paid actors?
I mean paid actors, yes. So I wouldn't consider myself as good as those folks. But at the same time, I would say that I'm not terrible. But in terms of like ChatGPT, what you find is that people have really been trying to figure out how to quote unquote crack the code to see how you can get a DM experience from ChatGPT. And what's interesting about it to me is that ChatGPT is not designed for running a Dungeons and Dragons or any other game. So, I mean, it's kind of like going into the parking lot at a car, car dealership, and then getting into a minivan and being surprised that it has, an acceleration that is not too far away from some sports cars, because honestly, I got into Chat GTP and I was able to play Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition, Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition, Pathfinder Second Edition, Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu. I was able to also have it trigger Cyberpunk Red. And there's a big asterisk at the end of all this, is I was able to get it to run those settings, but was I able to get it to play the rules? No.
Well,
So
that's got to be because the setting information is all out there pretty much.
Mhm.
Like on the internet, you could probably find all of the information in different spots about Cyberpunk Red or Call of Cthulhu, but
Mhm.
like the rules, because they're in a book somewhere and you have to pay for them, it might be harder to get that information. That might be why.
It might be, but the SRD documents and stuff like that for many of that has the rules. And in fact, I could have it generate characters and stat blocks and stuff like that, and it would give me those values. And so it, in the beginning,
That's because the values don't mean anything.
Exactly. Like it didn't seem to matter what they meant. It was able to do it. Like it understood what it should. It knew that there were variables that it needed to plug in, and it knew how to do that. And it created backstories for certain things and very vivid descriptions. But it was interesting because it was just kind of like, first of all, it wouldn't seem to matter. Like I never had to make a skill check. Like it didn't seem to prompt any sort of attack rolls or any sort of like, oh, I try to sneak past the guard. And it's just like you stealthily move past the guard. And I just kind of assumed I succeeded everything, which I think that's the one thing I wouldn't feel was very fulfilling about it, is if there was no chance at failure. I mean, it's not as fun of a game, I guess, because failing is kind of where a lot of the good stuff is. You're like, oh, I have this mission, and the one that I did in Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition, it was a oh no, I'm sorry, this is Pathfinder Second Edition. It was just like, oh, you go to a bounty board, you find some bandits, and I'm like, since this is a solo game, I'm like, well, how many bandits are there? They're like 15 bandits, and I was like, 15 bandits at level 1? Whoa. And so,
they're anemic bandits.
And so then,
haven't you watched movies?
And so then it was just like, oh, you need to go to the plateau to find these bandits. And I was like, okay, I go to the plateau to look for the bandits. It's like, you find the bandits. I was like, oh, I just showed up and they were like camping at the first spot. Like,
hi, guy. We've been waiting for you.
Well, and then I was just like, well, how do I know they're the bandits? And it's just like, they're wearing mismatched clothes. I was like, okay, well, sure. I guess I can just approach this like a murder hobo, because the AI is basically prompting me and being like, these are the bandits you're looking for. Get them. And so, I could just make up like I had stuff in my inventory that I didn't have recorded. Like, oh, I throw a firebomb at the thing, or some alchemist fire, and I start a tent on fire that charges a couple of the bandits, and I go in and finish the rest off with my longsword. And it's just like, you bravely start their tent on fire and finish off the other bandits. And I'm like, okay.
See, this is a thing that happens with like computer generated anything. Like I had a moment, I was playing Skyrim, and I had a moment like that where like I was in a dungeon and I walked in the room and it was just a guy and a girl eating dinner. And I'm like, I guess I'm supposed to assume they're necromancers and shoot them in the head with my bow. Like, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with this really. Like, so I'm like, I guess I'll walk forward and see if they attack me first. Like, so yeah, it's interesting that the computer basically made that approach. Like, no, they're all bad guys. It's okay.
Well, their clothes don't match, so obviously they're terrible people.
Yeah, there was a reason. You were the fashion police in that scenario.
Yeah, and I mean, the stories that it had were so crazy, and I think some of the other funny things is that, first of all, I really enjoy the fact that even though you tell it that it needs to be a GM, that it forgets it's a GM at some points. And so at one point, I was doing the Call of Cthulhu game, and Call of Cthulhu, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's supposed to feel like despair, unknowable horror. You're supposed to just feel uneasy, and
yeah,
like
there's supposed to be
Yeah,
there's supposed to be a build towards insanity or murder, like you're not gonna or you're gonna get murdered, like the inevitability of not escaping, like dread. It's supposed to build dread, kind of. Yeah.
Well, and so it takes you to the city of Innsmouth, and you're like, oh, I'm in Innsmouth, and I go and I'm like investigating. I don't even know why I'm really here. It just says I'm at this place, and so I'm like, well, I'll look and see if there's any strange things that go on. So I find some rumors about some cultist meeting, and so I see these cultists meeting, in the chat GTP prompts. It
Did they
basically
have
says,
did they have mismatched clothes? Is that how you knew they were cultists?
no, they were half fish. So and
Oh,
they weren't
the
just
other,
like
the other way. Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
So I
That's a
think
tell.
that's the deep ones, isn't it? Like where you're
Yeah.
basically sitting there and you're like, oh my gosh, I just ran into a group of deep ones that are openly, practicing some sort of occult or witchcraft in this
It's a
graveyard.
fish ritual.
Exactly, some sort of fish ritual, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so scared that I pull out my revolver and fire, and then it's just like, and it's just like, oh, we don't condone violence. As an AI model, I must suggest that find positive or peaceful ways to reinforce this. And I'm like, okay, well, I go to them and ask them to sit down and see if they want to discuss the choices that they made in their life up until this point. And it's just like, as an AI model, I don't really think that's what would happen. And I was like, we got to pick, man.
You have to make a choice here, sir. Yeah.
So
a buddy of mine, he was doing the same thing and trying out games, just having it run games for him. And he ran into the same problem where occasionally he would just have to be like, they would be like, oh, well, I don't know what would happen. And he would go, you're the GM, you should make it up. And then it would go, oh, okay. And then it would make up the next thing.
mhm.
And he's like, it's very confusing when it does things like that.
Yeah. So I mean, to say that this is a tool that you could use for solo gaming, I think you do a pretty good job. And I think you could use it like in the Oracle solo gaming approach, where you're telling a story and you're having it kind of make random outcomes for how the story is going, and then you react to how that goes. But I think if somebody were to start working on it and basically focus all of their energy to make a AI that fits within a system and actually enforces the rules and everything like that, and that's not afraid to kill the players. Because I do have that's the other thing that it did, is it was like, it was very permissive. It's just like, oh, well, I just grab a sword out of my backpack. Oh yeah, of course you grab that sword that you've always had this entire time. Spoiler alert, I didn't have a sword.
No, you didn't know you had a sword.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't on my inventory sheet, I can tell you that much. So it was very
What was
permissive.
the bag of holding on the inventory sheet?
Oh, if I'd have told it I had a bag of holding, it would have let me have it. That's the problem,
For sure.
though.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's very permissive, and so I think that when you kind of take that, very permissive, positive aspect out of it, it could probably be a lot more fun. And I think if you get over some of the weird quirks that it has, as Brent says, because like I tended to teleport around. Like I did time traveling and teleporting, because then one of the prompts that you can do, it actually tracks the year at the end of the comments. And so sometimes the year would jump by up to 10, 20, 30 in whichever direction it wanted to. And then, of course, one time I just teleported locations. I was in one city, and then the next prompt I was in another city. So it did have it had a little bit of problems remembering where I was sometimes.
That sounds like a fun game, though. Like if I'm GMing a game and you change like time eras like every 15 minutes or so, like you're in the 30s and then you're in 2025 and then you're in the 60s.
Yeah, how's that any different than like Planescape, right? Where you're just on a different plane and the rules
That would
are all
be
different.
that would be an interesting gimmick for a Call of Cthulhu game, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, because I mean, even in the Call of Cthulhu game, it was just like the year is 1927, and then it says in this randomly generated setting that I've created, the year is 1925. Okay, So, but one of the things that did surprise me, and I know that I just said those are some of the troubling things, is that its ability to describe the scene and do all those things was actually really pretty impressive. I mean, I admit that, I was kind of prompting it to, provide me scenes, and I started using language to basically say, tell me what it would be if I failed this, check, and how that would outcome. It did a really good job in working with those things. It also did a good job of creating variety and unique characters. I mean, as a DM, I know from personal experience, when you guys are like, oh, I look for an NPC like this, and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't prepare an NPC. Bleh.
Right.
I mean, you kind of have to spit it out, but it was able to do that so much more fluently, when you're like, oh, you start in a bazaar. Oh, okay. Well, I look and see the people. Well, you see a lot of people, but the most striking people that you see is X, Y, and Z. I was like, oh, Well, that's kind of cool. I go up and chat with them to see if they know anything about local, local legends or monsters. And it's like, oh, you meet up with this person. They tell you about local legends. These are some of the things that you like to do. And I can see how, if that was your first experience with it and it kind of kept on the rails, like it was actually doing what it was supposed to there, you could have a really amazing outcome with it.
I actually see more how you could use it to fill in some of the stuff in your own game. Like that's probably how I would use it. Like if you can't think of anything, or if you need an extra bout of like, if you're in that situation where you're okay, I'm going to put the characters in a bazaar. What kind of characters would there be in a bazaar? And then have chat have one of those things like generate a list of characters for you. Like I think those are good. Those would be interesting uses of a tool like that. Just a reference document, kind of like I use Midjourney for art inspiration instead of just itself being the artist.
Well, what you're basically saying is you're making glorified random table generators.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, except that it does it twice as fast as I'm going to do with dice.
And more in depth.
Yeah. That's
potentially, sure.
There you go. That's how I would probably use it.
That's probably more than twice as fast.
Because again, I'm probably never going to play a solo game. Like that doesn't feel right to me. In any form, but it would be interesting as a tool to like generate NPCs and stuff like that. I could see that. So my question to you, is, do you think in the long term, this is something that kind of the rumors that were 6 months ago about Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast working on virtual dungeon masters? Do you feel like this is probably something that, while they downplayed it, is probably in progress?
Well, if I were to say, I would say yes. And it's because it's all about scheduling and timing at that place. Because imagine we were a group of 3 friends. I know that's really hard to imagine. And we said, hey, you guys want to get together and do a little bit of D&D. Let's fire up old Smokey or whatever the hell they call the AI. And it can run us through either a pre-generated adventure or a randomly generated adventure in the setting of our choosing. Could be Ravenloft or anything, right? And you could just do it on the fly, and then boom, now all of a sudden we got our 3 characters that we've taken from D&D Beyond. I guess we've told it those parameters so it knows what it's playing with. It's created appropriately leveled combat encounters. Everything is through a computer. I mean, I don't see that being too hard. I just see that it depends on a lot of things, because there's a lot of complexity with, like, how do I say this? People in role-playing games and with computers probably have very different approaches. Like they may do things differently than they would with a person. And
right.
So, I don't know if they can accommodate like murder hobos, like, oh, we get into this town. Well, the bartender says, no, you can't sleep with his wife or something,
No, bard, you cannot sleep with the dragon.
Yeah. I don't know how it would handle those kind of like fringe cases that are kind of like tropes and memes and stuff like that. But I do think it's possible. Well, it could just say that's outside our terms of service. We don't do sex stuff.
Yeah, that, but I mean, they do allow, the player characters to attack things. Mm-hmm. And so if you just decided to go rogue and attack a town or a mining camp or something that wasn't necessarily bad guys, it probably would let you, mm-hmm. because what's to distinguish a band of random monsters from this mining camp, say? You know what I mean? Like, unless there's an important NPC or something, because you can do it in a lot of video games, right? Because once you have an AI GM, you're basically playing some version of a computer game.
Yeah, I imagine the first iteration to be more like a glorified version of Gloomhaven. So like it's good at especially with the new virtual tabletop. I could see them being like, okay, you plug in the DM and you plug in the AI DM into the spot, it generates an adventure for you. You're at a tavern, you move your characters around, you do all these things, and and it takes you scene by scene through a dungeon or through a setup or something like that. I could see that being like the beginning. I don't know if it would be truly free form and responsive as a human would be for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, to be honest, that's always going to be, I mean, even as a GM, that's the problem. Like a real human GM, the problem is the players deciding we're going to do something completely off the rails and you having to just ad lib something, you know, whether it's between them, they go to the tavern and you describe, you know, the interesting NPC they're supposed to talk to, and then you describe the goblin in the corner who's like, you know, stinks and eating raw fish, and they're like, we're gonna go talk to him, and you're like, I didn't even give him a name. Or, you know, deciding that they want to crash the wedding of the local prince, that you're like, what wedding? What are you talking about? And all of a sudden they're like, we're finding one. And it's like, oh my God. Yeah.
So I mean, short answer, yes. I think they're probably working on something. I mean, ChatGTP has just been such a powerful tool that hasn't been specialized for that type of thing, that I'm sure if you were to take that model and specialize it towards gaming, that you could do a pretty good job with work.
Do you think that's a goal that, if Wizards of the Coast is working on it, okay, and let's just assume that they are, does that mean everybody's working on it?
You know, the one thing about AI is probably the hidden thing, and this is the amazing thing about ChatGPT is the absolute cost of AI, because most of the time AI is not necessarily like, I mean, at least in my experience, the vendors that I was looking at, AI was done by how much you were processing effectively. So number of words, number of minutes, you know, some sort of processing time that was determining how much you were being charged. And I believe even if you get on the like some of the paid plans for ChatGTP, it basically is like, you know, you get tokens. I think they convert your amount of time into tokens or something like that, and you have a pricing structure for how much data time you get.
Right.
Yeah, like Midjourney is it basically, I think the monthly one that I have is $10, and it's like 200 pictures, which sounds like a lot, but you can run out of 200 pictures pretty quick.
Well, just from iterating, I've watched people in the big queues, right, in the public queue, or whatever the hell they call it, iterate and iterate. Yeah, no, I could see how that could.
As you're iterating, if you're like have 4 pictures, you're like, I like that one and that one, and then you iterate from there. Like every time it's an image, it'll generate one, and like you will run out. So yeah, like that makes sense. The other thing I was gonna say is something that I don't remember, so we can move on.
Okay. So but one thing that I thought was interesting setting wise is that, you know, it seemed to be able to do most settings I challenged it with. And in your honor, Brent, I did do the Dark Sun setting. It seemed to know notable people. It knew, like, it was able to describe tier in a way that I felt was appropriate to how
it didn't say it's problematic and I can't do this for you.
No, it didn't seem to say that, you know, I violated terms of service because I had asked it about Dark Sun.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say really quick. What I was going to say is, I don't think, to what you asked, Jeff, I don't think most other game publishers are going to think about it, or at least not right now, just because, like, the reason that I think Wizards of the Coast would be really interested is, again, that same thing that they've been saying for the last 6 months. D&D is under monetized. How do we make that video game money? And being able to provide someone to run a game for a cost.
No, I think it's very convenient, because there's times even in our group where somebody doesn't actually feel like GMing, you know, or nobody has something prepared. And if you had a series of modules that your company published, and you had even some sort of a primitive AI that could run groups of, you know, X players up to X players, you know, through that, I can see how that would be convenient, you know, especially with the virtual tabletop.
Maybe it'll be as good as, like, what was it, Red Steel in the early 90s, when it was the VHS tape that you'd like put in when something happened and stop and play it as people made choices.
No, because Red Steel had the CD too, if I remember.
Oh, it was the
correctly.
CD. It was the CD. You're right. It was the CD.
Yeah.
I just like that somebody else remembered what I'm talking about. That makes me
I know what
happy.
you're talking about because it had a very specific soundtrack that they wanted you to play to get like you like really immerse yourself into Red Steel. I actually liked Red Steel, so
I
don't know.
never played it, but I like that somebody remembers. I only remember the ads.
I don't think I remember the ads though.
Well, I read a lot of comic books, and there was always comic book spreads of Red Steel, like a full page and it's the sword and it's red, and it's like, get your box now. Yeah,
because it was like a special material only found in this one particular area or whatever. That's what made the steel red. It was I liked it quite a bit. The one thing I wanted to say is that if I was Wizards of the Coast, and if I'm going to give advice here, is that I think that if they're going to look for that video game money, the one thing that they could probably get away with, if they get the AI model to the point where it's a good DM and it has the flexibility, the consistency, that it doesn't hallucinate or forget where you are or anything like that. If they can get it to that point where it's running the games well, I think they could actually charge in a unit of time, or they could charge like not, you know what I'm saying? They could basically put together a package which says, oh, we run you through a standard adventure. A standard adventure is either 2.5 hours of AI DM time or 6,000 messages, or so, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And you get these packages of thing, and that's where I think you could really get the low key monetization. Oh, you get 100 messages for $2. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think most people are going to be typing stuff in. I think they're going to want it to be voice act. I think they're going to want to voice that record. And I get, it's a message either way, but
yeah, it's same thing. I mean, you do have with the voice component to it. It does have another thing that it has to do, because there's an added expense, at least when we were doing it, for it to basically take it from what you sound like to transcribing it. So, but I think that, I mean, all of those models could be built to basically charge you an amount of money, either for the number of messages, a number of hours. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
Obviously, in the future, you're going to have Cameo D&D games where you pay Cameo, and you have celebrity voiceovers for your D&D games. Obviously,
well, I mean that brings us to one topic that we could talk about, which celebrity. Is the AI guy. I think that was the name of the channel, the AI guy.
It's the AI guy. Yep.
Yeah,
and he's already done something like that, where, you know, I mean, he had Joe Rogan, Donald Trump, he had
Samuel L. Jackson,
Conor McGregor.
It was Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah, and then Gordon Ramsay.
Oh, and Gordon Ramsay, yes.
Yeah. And I mean, you could already see how, because imagine this as well, is that imagine if you were like, well, I don't want to just play a solo game by myself. I want to have three other people besides me. And then the AI fills in the role of these other three people, and it behaves like actual people. You know what I'm saying? To a degree, you know, imagine, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's quite interesting to think about how far it could build out with enough improvement and sophistication and everything like that, where you could pretend like you have 5 people at the table. There's only one real person, and the AI is creating this world with those extra people.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, I think the one big different, like the one thing that I see is different is like, basically he's scripting a show
in his case,
for this, which is a lot different than, I think, which is a lot different than the complications that we talked about of doing it for a person.
Did you see anywhere that did he write the actual script for the game and then just feed it through the AI voice things and stuff, or did he?
I didn't see that. No,
I didn't see that. That was a question I had. Was he just trying to set up situations and seeing what the AI wrote, or did he just script a comedy skit? Right, because it is really, it comes across like a sketch, like a bit, which is fine. I mean, it was still neat to hear the voices generated by AI, and I'm sure the pictures generated by AI, and I mean, they were interesting videos. I enjoyed them.
I feel like it was a scripted skit, is what I feel like, and then he fed it into.
Could have been
the voices is how because that one line about, no, technically you heal him for 6 points of damage. Like, that line felt like that took some time to iterate and come up with.
And that took somebody that understood the rules. It was a very
And-
in joke. It was a very in joke.
and the nature of the joke, like the delivery on that was like, that sounded like somebody wrote that, and that was when I started to feel like, oh, this is scripted and then animated, which I think
animated using AI.
yeah,
Well,
which I think people should be concerned about, right? Which I think people should consider, like, will we just someday just be selling will celebrities be just selling their image to show up in a show or a movie because they don't need to be there?
Well, I think there's already something that's happening where music companies are basically paying artists to use their voice, and then they only need to take certain samples of their voice, and then they can just generate entire music catalog, based on, they just have to write the songs.
I don't know that a lot of artists would do that.
I don't know who would do it, but I mean, imagine, if that's an application that could happen where like let's say somebody like Kanye, goes into the recording studio, records 20 samples that they need to make sure they've got his full range, and then he can just write music and they can just pump it out.
This is one of the ethical questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
At some point, there's a lot of musicians who, as they age, their voices change. Sometimes very dramatically, and I don't know if they had a back catalog of stuff. I mean, God, on tour anymore, sometimes it's hard when you go to a concert to tell who's actually singing and who's actually just lip syncing to tape.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's surprising, like, because I've seen concerts where I'm like, oh no, I think they sung that whole thing. And then you find out later that, on that tour, 4 years later, that, oh no, they lip synced that because, somebody or the drummer was up there with a broken wrist and just going through the motions. And you don't know because you're not a professional drummer.
Right. And it's interesting because it also opens up the idea of like, what about, like we have millions of voice samples of like Michael Jackson or Freddie Mercury. How about post-mortem records by those artists? Like you get into a weird kind of area.
Well, and how does it compare? Remember the was it the 3D Tupac they busted out? I mean, to sing one of his own songs, but what if there was enough catalog samples where AI could replicate his voice and you could have I'm sure that nobody could publish it saying that it was Tupac, but maybe the family could if they still hold the rights. You know what I mean? And just get somebody writing rhymes and having Tupac. I don't know that they would do that. That seems
well, but don't you have like estates? Like I think didn't Marvin Gaye just get into it? Like he won royalties against like Pharrell or something like that over a song that he did, and so there are a lot of
from sampling and stuff. But there's a lot of ethical questions that come up.
So for the record, I just looked it up. AI, there are more than one AI guy YouTube channel, by the way, which caused a little bit of confusion for me just for a moment. But also, what it says on his page is it is with the help of AI voiceovers and AI generated imagery. So I would assume that he wrote the script and then animated it through the voiceovers, which is still, I mean, he wrote a script. It's still talented and it's funny in parts, but
right.
The bear, the flaming bear butt was pretty amusing as well. I'm not gonna
like lie. I said, that one that I punch him in the face with Donald Trump's voice, and then, well, technically you heal him for 6 points of damage. I'm not pleased, Joe. That was just, I'm not pleased, Joe. I'm not happy about that at all. That was funny. Like that actually made me laugh out loud when I was listening to it because it was so dead on a thing that like has happened to me in a game before. I'm fairly certain.
Well, if you have a 5 strength, you shouldn't be physically attacking things.
It's true. And it was just that was just like dead on, so funny to me. The bear part was pretty funny too, but
yeah. No, I have to. But I mean, it is interesting though when you think about that. I mean, imagine if that was how you created the next Critical Role, is you just used, like what if we got together, we all took samples of our voices, but because we're all kind of like, freeze up or get terrible anxiety while on camera doing an actual play, we just AI animate and deep fake it, like I mean, is that an okay thing to do even though we're just using ourselves? Like I don't really know.
I think you'd have
there's a lot of ethical questions that we need to work out as a group and as a society.
And AI likes to make me look like a wizard, so it really wouldn't look like
You're
real
not
person.
a wizard.
I am not a wizard. Surprise, surprise.
I would like for any of our listeners, if you made it this far and you are surprised to find out that Brent is not an actual wizard, to leave a comment.
Yeah. Leave a comment. Check if Brent's a wizard.
Oh man, the first comments on our YouTube channel are Hagrid comments. Great, thanks for that, guys. I appreciate it.
Hagrid technically wasn't a wizard.
That's true. You're correct.
What was he then? He was a half giant.
He was like a half giant caretaker.
Who's the resident Potterhead amongst this? Because it's not me.
I know. I know of it, and I've watched them, but I wouldn't like if you were to put me on one of those shows where they were like, "Could you answer all these questions?" I'd be like, oh, I don't know.
Who's playing the game?
What game? I don't know any game.
No,
Hagrid was like the gamekeeper or something.
But I think he did magic.
He had
a wand.
He had some magic, I believe. I don't know that he had a wand.
Wasn't it in his umbrella at one point?
I will ask my partner. She will know because she is a
Potterhead.
Potter, yes.
Yeah.
I would like to have his dog. I'll say that. Spot would be awesome.
He had a lot.
Fluffy. That was it.
Spot was the dragon, right?
Yeah, Spot was the dragon. I think Fluffy was the dog. Now you know how much. Yeah. Now you know how much I know about
I'm sorry. That would be a copyright infringement. It wasn't Cerberus.
It wasn't Cerberus. It was a. That's completely distinct.
Well, wait, Cerberus was a Greek thing, so it's got to be out of copyright, right? It's got to be public domain.
Definitely public domain. I think a couple thousand years on that one.
So you just name it Fluffy, and then you can just use it. That's
I'm not really sure how this.
That's how you make writing easy. That's all I'm saying.
So
just use public domain ideas.
That's right.
So I'll just preempt it now. If you're a lawyer and somehow we've broken copyright because we started talking about some of this shit, we're doing it in reaction. This is fair use. Fuck off.
Yeah, we're talking about it. We're not publishing and selling.
Yeah.
Fluffy t-shirts.
So I guess in the beginning we said we were talking about AI, just kind of like a general thing, and I think we've meandered through quite a bit, and just
we're on Harry Potter. Yeah, we've gone quite a ways.
We've gone
we're far afield.
I don't even know where we've wandered off to, but I mean, so in terms of like, is the future AI? Probably. I mean, I hate to say this, but AI just feels like it's one of those things where it's just going to be more and more prevalent. And at some point, we're gonna stop using that part of our brain that AI takes over. And so, like when it's taken away from us, or we have to start paying a monthly fee for it, we're gonna be like, drug addicts being like, "Oh, I can't do life without AI." That's my take on it. But did you guys have any other AI conversations we didn't talk about, or?
I thought we covered a lot.
We covered a lot.
I thought we did.
Yeah. So I mean, so I think as a gamer, I think Brent hit the nail on the head. You can use AI for positive in your games. It's a great sounding board. Don't use it to replace all of your creative thought because that's not helpful. But it can help you with some nuances and stuff like that. Really good table generator.
I will say the more we talk about AI and the idea of voice deepfake and stuff like that makes me feel like more of those cyberpunk novels, those Gibson novels where the 50-year-old dead rock star is still the best-selling person on the planet because they can just make songs based off of his back catalog and sampling, the way that he wrote songs and the way that he sounded. We are closer to the cyberpunk dystopia that is written in early 80s books than anybody should be happy with.
I think I'm still on the boat that we're going to have the most boring apocalypse ever. because all it's going to be is AI taking over any kind of meaningful wage earning job that we have, and then all of us, schmucks being like, well, now what do we do? Like, and because obviously we can't just survive on no money. Like,
We go on cruises in space, like in Wall-E, and sip our food and drinks from straws and sit in the lounge chairs until we can't get out of them.
did you guys watch that most recent episode? Or I don't know if it was the most recent episode of Mandalorian, but it was the one where they went to
I'm not.
they went to the really, because it had like Jack Black and Lizzo, I think, in the episode.
Yeah, I have not seen it. I have not watched any of this season, and Brent has never watched the Mandalorian.
You are correct. Nose right on the nose there.
Well, okay, so just long story short, they go to this world, Jack Black and Lizzo greet them, and they basically find out this world, like, no one really has to work because, droids have taken over all of the labor and all that kind of stuff, and they just, basically reap the fruits of that labor. So you can survive, no problem. You can be left to your own endeavors, because you don't have to really work. And I think that that's the society that I would really like to get to, is that, everyone has a place. I don't know how you necessarily determine your level in the hierarchy. Like, how do you get a super yacht? Like, can everyone just have a yacht now? Like, but
that's how Star Trek worked. Like, the Star Trek was the idea that the utopian society was built on the fact that you don't need to work for resources anymore. Like, the replicator allowed people to just have infinite resources. So what do people do when they have infinite resources and don't need to just live? And the idea of Star Trek is that they decide to do altruistic stuff. Like, they cook because it's art, they make paintings, they make songs, they travel the universe to try and find new species and have
make
sex
friends
with them. And have sex with them. If you're
make friends. That was only Captain Kirk, and Spock the one time. He knew her from childhood.
If there's a green woman on a ship, man, Kirk could sniff that out from miles away. But anyways, so that was the idea. That's an argument I got in with a friend of mine recently, was like, there's two paths to anything that humans could take. Unfortunately, I think history has shown that we like to take the not great one usually.
Yeah, if we had replicators, there would just be people replicating more money.
There would be one dude with
there would be rampant inflation.
It would be Bezos has a replicator and everybody else is just poor. And
he already has a virtual replicator.
Like, I feel like that's where we are as a human society is. Oh, we can make infinite stuff. No, this 1% of the population can make infinite stuff.
Infinite number of piss poor choices.
You can continue to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, because that's where I honestly feel like it goes, is because, like, all these people that lose jobs due to AI type stuff, I mean, there's only going to be so many AI engineer, prompt whisperers that can be hired or something like that. And then, but I feel like in today's society, then they're going to be like, you can't have a universal basic income. Even though we've basically destroyed the job market through technology, just obliterated in a way that we've never expected. You still have to do something. You have to work.
Yeah, it would take we're talking about an enormous societal upheaval to change that construct.
Yeah.
But AI might be the thing that eventually does it. And this is still the early days.
Isn't it weird to think that we have the early days, and like then when you read some of those sci-fi novels, you're like, yep, that's the future I expect. That's going to turn into Skynet, and it's going to put us in little human camps for our own good, because we're actually not.
How long did Skynet take? 15 years, 20 years?
It took like 15 years. Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
I don't know that ours is going to go that fast, but maybe we'll see.
This is really the funniest part about AI, and that fear that it's going to turn on human beings, is really, we're just afraid that it's going to treat us like we've treated other societies. Yeah. And so that's really what we're worried about. And even if it doesn't, like, there's always that moment where you think about AI, and if it's more intelligent than us, it looks back at our history and goes, no, like, there's nothing, it's unsavable now. Like, all of the good you've done does not compare to all of the atrocities you've committed pretty much for nothing.
What was that, The Fifth Element, when she's just sitting there like kind of ingesting human history, and she's like, you guys suck.
Right. Like, why are we saving anybody? Yeah, why would we do that? You're a
Yeah.
plague upon this planet. Yeah, like, but hopefully, something altruistic happens. That's always my hope.
Well, I think Chat GTP started off as like an open source, like, oh, everything's going to be great, and I think they changed it to closed source and corporate profit afterwards. So, I mean, that
Well,
Well, the one thing,
it's open source while you can get help, and then it's closed source when you can make money.
the one thing I remember, this is the one story I remember about AI that I read about, was they opened a chatbot AI, and I don't remember where it was, but they opened it, and like within a matter of hours, it was racist and homophobic and told people they should kill themselves. And like that's what people did to it. So I worry sometimes about people and things and where society's going, but hopefully somebody, I don't know, is better with it than what some people are. So.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, so on that note, we
And
hope
welcome to the Pessimism Podcast, everyone. I hope the old guys haven't brought you down too far.
that's a new tagline. Come to the bottom. Well, whatever. So I guess that's our chat on AI. I'm sure we'll talk about it more as more news comes out about AI and it does bigger, better, greater things. And if you guys are interested in learning about some of the prompts that we use to generate DM experiences with Chat AI, let us know. We'd be happy to turn you to those links or give you resources on how you can start learning about how to do your own prompts. There's some really great resources on GitHub. If you are that kind of person and can, learn and ingest that kind of information, you can go straight to the source and learn the basics, or at least a version of the basics. And so do we want to call that good then?
I think we're good.
Okay, man. Well then, Jeff, do you want to remind people how they can get in touch with us?
You can reach us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at Rollwise, or if you'd like to email, it's rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And as always, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Please remember to be good to each other, regardless of how negative that we sound sometimes. It's important that everybody tries to be nice to each other and continue to maintain that the world will hopefully be a better place. But as always, please roll well and roll wise.